Thank you. My name is Dr. Kevin Horton, and actually I just got back from Lewistown. We were up in the Little Belt Mountains with a bunch of junior high teenagers, and they got 14 to 15 straight lessons on Genesis, and it was so interesting because we had a horrible hailstorm. The first day we're up there, and their tents literally poked holes in their tents, and their sleeping bags got wet, and so you can imagine that night it was a shivering cold night for all those kids, and for me it was just all the noise of the furnace in my camper kicking in. Just couldn't sleep, you know. and I was reminded that multiple times throughout the week, but I taught them this lesson, and this has probably stirred the most interest and controversy, but it's a very important lesson that's often missed and often not taught. This and the cause of the flood of Noah, and we're going to get into that today. Because the key that's so important for us in our day and age is all the issues of race. And I want to just put this in your mind right now. The word race is an evolutionary term. It is not a Christian term. Did you catch that? It's an evolutionary term of suppose, and it's really a little bit of what you think about Adolf Hitler. We are the superior race. They're thinking of themselves in terms of evolutionary terms. Some races are less evolved than others from the monkeys. And that's how people look at it. We're not racist here because we're all one race. I always challenge people when we deal with this issue is the next time you're filling out one of those government forms where you have to say what your race is, there's an other box and put in human, and then the fun begins, okay? So it is, and then you can have a great discussion. I just had one recently at the Sheriff's Department renewing a certain permit I have. And so that became a great discussion, so that was kind of cool. All right, so we think about that race along with different people groups. That's the Christian worldview, the Judeo-Christian worldview. And all of these different religions seem to follow these people groups. And how did they develop? By the end of the day, I think you'll have an answer for that, one that you maybe had never heard before. And I was just in South Dakota at Crazy Horse Monument, and we were actually invited to come into the monument museum and go downstairs and have a discussion about people groups. And we had this very discussion, and it was very enlightening to hear everybody talk about how they viewed the people groups and prejudices that we do have, and how we need to think about this in biblical terms. So that brings up the question that we must answer today. What is the appropriate response to people groups and their beliefs as a believer in Christ? So that's an important thing. And then more to the real center cause is how and why. Because sometimes you'll hear how, but you won't get why we got the nations. Why did God do this? Why did he divide us by language groups? And families with certain languages were set in different directions. Why did he do that? And then where did the races, and I don't want to use that word, but that's what we're thinking, where did the people groups come from? And it comes from the event called when the earth was divided. When the earth was divided. In fact, you'll read, some people have this, you'll read in the Old Testament where in the 8 days of Peleg, the earth was divided. And people have different opinions of what that means. It's simply when God divided them by people groups. That's the earth is divided. So we're going to study this, and we're going to take a look at it in detail. And it's recorded in Genesis chapter 11. And that's where the Tower of Babel is recorded and talked about. But what's interesting, an interesting observation is Genesis 10 is called the Table of Nations, where all the people groups went after the tower. Did you catch that? 10 has where they'll go, the people groups go, and 11 is the cause. And it's kind of in reverse order. You would think you would talk about the tower and then say, here's where they went. And so we have to ask ourselves this important question. Why did Moses, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, put the people groups first and where they dispersed to ahead of the tower event? And we had this discussion when I was in seminary in Moody. And the professor of Old Testament studies said, how he's thought about it for years. There's no magical answer other than he thinks that God wants us to know that going into the nations is a good thing. Now, when you think about that, we don't usually think that way today. We think nations cause wars, right? And if we all will get together, wouldn't it be better? In fact, that's what we're being taught. Well, we'll see if we can get an answer to that in a little bit. But I believe the nations are a blessing to us in a way that you hadn't thought about. So in Genesis 11 starts out this way. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. Okay, so got to put this in context now. These two mountains are the mountains of Ararat. The highest one is the mountain we call Ararat, and the second one is one of the mountains of Ararat. Noah's ship most likely landed on one of these mountains. And what's interesting about them is below them is sedimentary rock. And then this volcanic rock came up through the soft sedimentary layers during Noah's flood and built up this mountain, this cone. So that tells us a couple things. One, we know that sedimentary rock came from the flood of Noah. Well, you would think about it. A worldwide catastrophe is tearing everything up, and then it settles down, and that makes all these sedimentary layers full of dead things. And then this volcano came up through it and laid out volcanic rock on top, which makes me think that it may be possible that shortly after they landed, it started to erupt again, and they probably had to scoot down the mountain. And if they scooted down the mountain, and by the way, the mountain is settled in between these four major seas, the Black Sea, the Caspian, which is a salt sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Persian Gulf. Right in the middle, and bordered by three nations, Armenia, Turkey, and Iran. So that's what expeditions to go up there and find the ark are always dicey, because you're dealing with all the political stuff that's going around that mountain. And so, but I wonder if that since the flood of Noah, about 200 to 300 years now, to cook down there, and now we have petroleum products seeping up for the first time. This is the first use of that word in the Bible after the flood of Noah. It's never used before that. And so they had petroleum product, asphalt, that they used for their mortar, just like we would pave our streets. And they said, "Come, let us build for ourselves a city and a tower with its top to the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole land." By the way, when it says, "let us make a name for ourselves," that is a translation of a literal translation would be, "let us become men of the name." Become men of the name, or people of the name, but specifically men of the name. Then they won't be dispersed all over the earth. Now, we know that God's going to judge them. He's going to judge them for this tower, and he's telling us up to now that the reason that he's going to judge them is because they're going to build this city, and they're building a tower, its tops to the heavens. Stop there. Many of you are like me, and you go, okay, so what? What's the big deal about a tower, and what's the big deal about a city? And why is God going to disperse them? Well, we do know that after the flood of Noah, they were given a command to spread out across the earth. So there is something there, and many people, that's all their answer is. To me, that wasn't enough. That seems just like, well, there are other ways to do this. But then the tower with its tops to the heavens. And what we've discovered just now today, looking worldwide, and there's the question, is what's the big deal with the tower? And those are the high places. In fact, even the highest mountains in Hawaii are sacred to the Native Americans. That's where they do their work, or the Native Hawaiians. That's where they do their worships. Central America, the Mayans have those towers that they build up. And what did they do up there? What did they do up there? They're reaching up to the gods, small g. By the way, the Bible speaks of this plainly and literally calls gods, small g, demons. High-ranking, strong demons, fallen angels, as gods. And there's also good angels called gods in a small g sense. They're a powerful class of angels. And then there is the Creator God who created them. We even call him the Most High God. Isn't that interesting? He's the creator God. We often try to look at the Bible from our naturalistic worldview, and we don't quite get that there's a supernatural world going on around us. And so we see that in Numbers, when they're about ready to move into the land, God is telling them that they should drive out all the inhabitants of the land before you and destroy all their figured stones, destroy their metal images. That's to be their little home gods that they would use to worship, which are a means in which they communicate with the demons, and demolish their high places, the place where you reach up to them, and that's where you really get the power from demons. By the way, do people worship demons today? All over the world. Why in America would anybody worship Satan and the demons? Two reasons. They're interconnected. Power and sex. That's it. That's the main reason. We see that all throughout history. Power. And people pursue this power. They think it's going to make them powerful. In the end, it strips them of life. And God is saying, drive them out and destroy their high places, because that's where you communicate directly with the demons. And so we see in Greek mythology, where do they go? Up on the mountains. We see it all over the world that they do this. So in Leviticus, God is warning them, if you do this, I'm going to destroy your high places and cut down your incense altars that you're doing to worship the demons. And eventually, in Kings, we see that Solomon, the great King Solomon, who started out his life so well, he's one that just puts fear into me, because he started out so well and ended so badly. It's a potential for all of us. But he built high places for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab. By the way, what is Chemosh? That is a literal name of a literal demon. All right, so there you are. And so also Moloch, the abomination of the Ammonites, on the mountain east of Jerusalem. So he literally pulled in all the pagan worship, the worst stuff, and that was the beginning of the demise of Israel again. So God's about to judge the people because they decided to build a city. Remember, they were supposed to disperse. That is correct. Then they're going to build a tower with its top to the heavens. And when they're going up into the heavens, they're trying to reach the morning stars. The morning stars is a Hebrewism for demons or angels. It can be either. It can be good angels, bad angels, because Jesus is called the what? Bright morning star. He's the highest, the brightest of the angelic world, and make a name for themselves. Literally become men of the name. Did you hear me say that? What were they trying to do? Become men of the name. You heard that, right? Keep that in mind. And not be dispersed. That's important. That we'll come back to that. And the Lord came down, and by the way, you notice this is not capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. This is lowercase l, or upper L, but lowercase O-R-D. The translators are telling us that this is not the name of God, the covenant name of God, but this is his name as king and ruler, Adonai. That's the Hebrew word Adonai, is a ruler. And so the ruler of heaven came down to see the city and the tower in which the children of Adam had made. And that's what it says there, had built. The children of Adam had built. And Adonai said, behold, they are one people, and they all have one language. And this is interesting. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. Really? Well, what more are they going to do? And nothing that they propose to do will be impossible for them. And so we see this judgment of this class of different things. It's going to free them up to do something really bad. Something really bad that God's going to end here. And in order to understand this, I have to help you take it in context. In context. And I'm going to take you back to Genesis chapter 3. Now, in Genesis 1 and 2, we see the creation of the world. Genesis 1 is a chronology. Genesis 2 is a parenthetical insert where it stops the forward movement of the chronology and gives you information about what happened back there. And that's where we see more details of how he made humanity and Adam and Eve and how he brought Eve to her and all of that. And the declaration of marriage is there. And then in Genesis 3, we find that the serpent comes and he tempts Eve and Adam, in a sense, because Adam will fall too. And Eve is tempted, and she takes of the fruit of the tree that was forbidden and brings sin into the world. And Adam, her husband, who had the authority to stop her, did not. And he's held accountable for that. Now, what's interesting is in most of Christendom, and I'm using that word in the worldly sense of all churches that call themselves Christian, in most of Christendom, they don't believe this story to be literal. In fact, I was invited to go to a conference about 2-3 years ago by a friend of mine. I never would have considered going to it, but he knew I needed to. And it was very important for me to see what was really being said. I had to hear it from the horse's mouth. And Mr. Ed was speaking, and I think that was about as intelligent as it got. And some of you didn't know what that meant because you're young. But anyways, at this conference, which is a science and Bible conference, there were speakers helping us understand the Bible better and understand that there really wasn't just one Adam and Eve. There were 10,000 Adam and Eves who had evolved from the monkeys and were still interbreeding with the monkeys, and that's how that really happened. Yeah, some of you are struggling, saying, really? The majority of Christendom teaches some version of this. Wheaton College, all about it. Wheaton College was there, and they were backing that. That's a well-known Christian college. I said that at one church, and one of the friends of mine came up afterwards, and he was a graduate of Wheaton College and took me to task. And I said, I've got the biology book right here. You want to read it? And it says this sort of stuff. Just amazing. But there was an Adam and Eve. There literally was an Adam and Eve. And they literally fell. And after that event happened, death came into the world, which is a whole other theological discussion, which is a great discussion we should have one day. But death comes into the world. God does it through curses, and he starts curse the animal, the serpent, which was evidently a beast of the field that was now transported into something that crawls on its belly. That's all we know. Then he speaks to the demon that controlled that animal, and that would be Satan. We're told that in Revelation, confirmed that that's true. And he says this, and he pronounces this curse to Satan before then he goes to the woman and then the man. And he says this, I will put enmity, that means strife, between you and the woman. He's speaking not to Adam and Eve, but he's speaking to Satan. I will put battle between you and the woman, not the man, the woman, between your offspring and her offspring. Oh, it's offspring of the woman. And this now goes singular. It's plural, between your offspring, plural, and her offspring, plural, but he, singular, shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Now, this is spoken in poetic language in the Hebrew. The narrative breaks into poetry here, and Satan is here listening. A bruise to the head, is that a good thing? That's pretty fatal. But a bruise to the heel is painful. This is a picture, the first picture of the coming Messiah. He will be called the Son of the Woman. And he's coming, and he's going to destroy you, Satan, but you're going to harm him. Do you see the cross? See, the cross is pictured here, and it's often called the great proto-evangelium, the first gospel. Prototype is the first, right? Proto-evangelium gospel. And the message is there's a coming Son of the Woman who Satan is going to harm, but he will destroy Satan. All right. Now, if you were Satan and you just heard this, what are you going to do? You're going to try and stop this. You're going to stop it with all your might. And as we read about the bloodline of the coming Messiah, which turns out to be through the line of Abraham, and then Isaac, then Jacob, who's renamed Israel, and then Judah, and so on, all the way up to King David and beyond, we realize as we read the history of the Bible, what do you see Satan doing? Trying to destroy the seed line of the Messiah. And it hits its climax where? In a little town called Bethlehem, where he tries to kill the Messiah baby. And God miraculously sends Joseph and Mary to Egypt to prevent that. And so all along the way throughout the whole Old Testament, we see Satan trying to attack the bloodline of the Messiah and stop him from coming, the son of the woman. The son of the woman. He stopped trying to stop it all along the way. And even like you think of the book of Esther, what was Esther about? Kill all the Jews. And God intervenes again and reverses that. And so we see that all the way through. And it starts now. And we have this bloodline of the Messiah projected. This is in Genesis chapter 3. This is given, right? And now it's going to begin. What does Genesis chapter 4 speak about? Murder. And who is murdered? The godly one. The line of Abel. You see? And so there's a murder that's going to occur, and it is against the bloodline of Abel, which apparently was the one who would be who the Messiah would come from. And you can see Satan doing this and going in. And you can see Eve being destroyed and loss of her son. And by the way, murder exposes how evil humanity has now become. And we're no different now. Murder is in us. We could do that, pushed to the wrong way. And Satan was behind this one. And we know that this was an attack on the bloodline because what follows is this. And Adam knew his wife again. Do I need to explain that? I think we got that right. And she bore a son and called his name Seth. And she said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel. You see how she perceived that? That maybe that Abel was the coming son who would destroy Satan. Now, she didn't know that it was going to be many generations later, but you see, she saw the bloodline destroyed there, but by Cain. So Seth was also, to Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. At that time, the people began to call upon the name of Yahweh. You see that, by the way, and I hope you know this. If you don't, this is time to learn it, is when you see in the Old Testament capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, the translators are now telling you it's not talking about Adonai, the position of a king or Lord, but rather it's the covenant name of God, Yahweh. Yahweh. And so whenever you see that, call upon the name of Yahweh. So they're starting to worship the one true God, Yahweh, instead of like where they will later worship Chemosh and Moloch, were demons. So that is why we see that name often in the text. And it's important for us to know that. All right, so we see that the murder was the first attack on the bloodline of the Messiah. And what did God do in response? Sent another son. What did Satan start to realize? Well, they can just keep making more. So I guess that murder's not going to stop it. So if murder's not going to stop it, what can we do next? If you can't beat them, join them. So the Nephilim. The Nephilim. The next event that's recorded is the flood of Noah. And in the flood of Noah, there are 4 verses that tell us why God flooded the earth in Genesis 6, 1 through 4. It's a preface to the flood. And after that, then we see everything else as the flood is going in action. So we need to look carefully at Genesis 6, 1 through 4. So here it is. When men began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them. Now, many people ask, oh, wait a minute, Cain, the Bible says he had wives. Where did he get them? What's the answer? His sisters. It's obvious and clear. That was all there was. And there would be nothing wrong with that. That would be normal. And in fact, it's normal all the way up to about the time of Moses, that you marry within your family. That's very, very common. And it was no wrong reason not to, because the genetic defects that we now have in our family lines that have built up over the years, that if we marry too close together, tends to give us defected children. So it's better for the hybrid vigor that we talk about in the veterinary term of mixing. And so we recommend people not marry too close for that reason, and many states outlaw it. But in that time, it was normal. Okay, daughters are born to the sons of Adam, to Adam, all right, and his family. And the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. All right, everybody understand that? Or is everybody kind of going, who are the sons of God? Let me read that. It actually says the sons of God, B'nai Elohim in Hebrew. B'nai, Ben, if the word Ben means son, B'nai is plural, okay? So sons, and then Elohim is the word God, all right? And it can be spoken of as the Most High God, or it can even be spoken of as the gods, small g. It can be either way in the Old Testament. The B'nai Elohim saw that the daughters of Adam, literally Adam, were attractive and took as their wives. They married them, any they chose. And Yahweh said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. This is now a proclamation that I'm going to bring the flood in 120 years. It also gives us a time frame for for Noah to build the ship. And it'll take him a long time to build a ship that big. This is a huge ship, ocean-going ship. It's a football field and a half long. So it's very much bigger than the little archies we often see. So God now, we see these sons of God are taking the daughters of men as wives, and that when that happens, God proclaims that he's going to send the flood in 120 years. And here's why. The Nephilim, the giants, were on the earth in those days and also afterwards. Did you catch that last line? And also afterwards. Do you remember when Joshua and Caleb, and what did all the spies say? The Nephilim are there. The giants are there. We can't beat them. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterwards when the sons of God came into the daughters of man and bore children to them. Now, if you were Hebrew, and you were reading this in the Hebrew Bible, and that was your native language, this would be jumping off the page for you. These were the mighty men of old, the men of the name. Did you catch that? In case I didn't say it enough before, did you catch it now? This is where the men of the name are. They are the Nephilim. They are the Nephilim. All right, so we got to figure out who are the sons of God to make this correct in our mind, because this is an attack on the bloodline of the Messiah. And that's why the flood of Noah. It's an attack on the bloodline. All right, so who are the sons of God? Job chapter 6, and maybe you know the story where Satan comes before God, and God gives him permission because Satan is mocking that Job is protected so well by God, and God says, okay, I'm going to let you strip him of all things. And it's pretty harsh. And so this is where the setup of that happens. Now, there was a day when the sons of God, B'nai Elohim in the Hebrew, came to present themselves before Yahweh, and Satan also came among them. All right, just stop there in the English. That's starting to make your hair go up a little bit, doesn't it? You're starting to say, what? What is this? Let's read it in the New International Version. One day, the angels, they translate B'nai Elohim to what it means to the Hebrew people, came to present themselves before Yahweh, and Satan also came with them. And that makes sense in this context, doesn't it? That this would be angels. But in the other context, that's pretty disturbing. That's disturbing. Now, if you know the book of Job, Job is going to be visited after he goes through these terrible trials, loses his family, loses his wealth, loses his health. And he's sitting on an ash pile, scraping pustules off his skin, trying to relieve the pressure. I mean, it's a terrible story. And these three friends come, and they want to sit down, and they spend a week just sitting there, not saying a word, and they finally get the courage to speak and say, Job, the reason you're having all these troubles have to be because you're an evil man. and you got your wealth by evil means. Because no God would do this unless you're evil. And so the whole story is about Job defending himself and these other three fellows defending their bad theology. And in the end, Job's theology isn't perfect either. And God now speaks at the very end. And God's speaking to Job. He says, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. In other words, Job, how smart are you really? Here's the test. Where were you exactly when I created the earth? And he goes on and says, or determined its measurements. Surely you know. How big should the earth be, Job? You certainly can tell me on that one. Or stretched a line upon it. In other words, actually made it that way. On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? Oh, how is it held up there, Job? Tell me, please. Tell me how this is. What's he saying? You know nothing. By the way, next time somebody says, oh, the science has disproved the Bible, you know nothing. You know nothing. And it really is true. I mean, I live in this world now, and I just go, the stuff that they say are so arrogantly against the Bible is just garbage. And if you have the full knowledge of their science, you just go. But so Job is being taught that by God. But as he says this, look at the next verse. During the creation, when the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. By the way, parallel poetry. So those letters in black are the same thing spoken in different ways. That's standard in Hebrew parallel poetry. Morning stars are the sons of God, and the sons of God are angels. They were there at creation, or during this phase of creation. We don't know exactly when they're created, but obviously they were there at this point in time. Morning stars and sons of God are parallel. So let's now put that back into Genesis 6, 1 through 4, and see what it says. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the angels saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they chose as their wives any they chose. I'm letting that silence settle in, because you're just going, whoa. You know, I had a hard time teaching this for years. It didn't take me, only 15 years or so to figure out that this is exactly what it means. I mean, to be so certain that I knew for sure. I know that's what it says. No issue in the Hebrew, all right? But it took me a lot of years to do that, and then it's taken me a number of years to have the confidence to speak it. Why? And that's what I caught myself about 2 years ago saying, why? I can preach anywhere in the gospel. I'll take on various doctrines and give you my what I think the text says. I had any trouble. But this one, I tended to keep quiet. You know why? Because I'm also a scientist. And scientists are trained in naturalism. Life just spontaneously arose, which is, I just stop for a minute there and think about that. The Bible says God took dirt and made Adam, right? Evolution says dirt made us. Dirt is really smart, okay? It's really smart. It can really, and that's what it says. All right, it just cut right through it. You say, so you believe in evolution? Oh yeah, we've proven it. Oh really? So you say dirt made us. Because you do worship the earth because it made us, and it's just dirt and rocks and chemicals, and you say those chemicals just came really smart and came up with DNA. Wow. That's amazing dirt. Give me a couple of buckets of that. So I was trained in naturalism, which I later recently kind of discovered how atheistic it is. And then I realized the Bible is supernatural. And I'm teaching you supernatural things. And if you've been trained in naturalism in the Western United States, Western culture, this is tough because we don't think this way. But this is supernatural. And most of the world who are not Christians know this stuff to be true. We just give them the correct view because their demons are teaching them perversions of this. All right, so forget that because that was a mistake and I didn't get it out of here. Then Yahweh said, and this is where he pronounces, after they took them as wives, the angels take human women as wives. They obviously materialize into a human body that is fully capable. That's the struggle we all have. one famous creation guy, who many of you probably know, he will blatantly say this is wrong because angels don't have DNA. And he refers to what verse in the Bible? There ain't one. Okay? And that's as best English as my mom would give me. Ain't. All right? And she was an English teacher, but she'd allow it in this case. There isn't one. There isn't one. This verse actually says they do. It says they do, because it goes on and says afterwards, and God pronounces this decree, and then says the Nephilim, the giants, were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards. What is the criteria that made the Nephilim? When the angels came into the daughters of man. Are we clear there? Adam and what's interesting in Hebrew storytelling is phenomenal. And once you get the keys to it, there are clues in the verbal structure that tell you what a Hebrew person would understand. And we come to this next words, they are pivotal. If they heard it in the verbal structure, they would say, whoa, that's not supposed to be. That changes everything. And here's what changes everything. They bore children to them. And in Hebrew, that is pivotal. Whoa, who saw that coming? And you can see why God destroyed that. And these were the mighty men of old, the men of the name. The men of the name. And it's an attack on the bloodline of the Messiah. You see, if that were allowed to continue, and now comes the son of the woman, Satan could say, oh no, I'm the Savior, that's my son. I put the Nephilim there. That is my son. You think God would allow that to happen? No. And so he destroyed the whole earth. And if you look in the New Testament, in 1 Peter, 2 Peter, 1 Peter 3, 2 Peter 2, and the book of Jude, you're going to find out what happened to these angels. I had a professor of Old Testament. I told you about him already. I asked him about this question publicly, and he wouldn't answer it. He wouldn't answer it. Privately, he told me what he believed, and it was especially because the New Testament reiterates it. 1 Peter chapter 3, 2 Peter chapter 2, and Jude. You can just start in Jude. That answers it right there. What happened to the angels who did this? All right? But they were the mighty men, the men of the name. Now, to add to that, I'm going to give you some more evidence, and that is from Josephus, who was an historian of the Jews, contracted by the Roman government. So they wanted to know the history of the Jews to try and figure out how to manage these people who are so difficult to manage. And so Josephus wrote the history of the Jews, and in there he talks about this verse. Would you like to see what he says? How did he say it? What did the Jews think at the time of Jesus happened here? And this is from a book on my shelf. For many angels of God, accompanied with women, begot sons. That's what they believed. Wow. And so what I believe here this is Satan's plot to stop the son of the woman. And if you can't beat him, join him. And so now he tries to infiltrate the bloodline of the Messiah and take credit for our salvation. And how did God end that? He destroyed them by the flood. All the Nephilim were killed. Now, you said, but they came back, right? Didn't it say afterwards also? Well, they were all killed here. So that's a done deal. And then after the flood, God makes a covenant with Noah. And what does he promise he would never do again? So God's limited his hand. So he's not going to be able to do that again. So what's going to happen now? They're trying to build a city with its tower to the heavens to become men of the name. That is clearly saying we are calling on the Nephilim to come back. We're building the tower up to the heavens to reach the demon gods because we want to be powerful. Remember, why do people want to invite demons into their lives? Power and sex. Always is. And it catches us, it sucks us in. Humanity loves it, and so they go after darkness. And by the way, our culture is infiltrated with that now. That's what our culture is doing. They're going after those things. Well, that's what's going to happen. They're going to bring them back. That's their plan. Now, when we get to book of Deuteronomy, and let me give you the context of Deuteronomy because many people don't understand this. But the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible written by Moses, right? And so when he comes to the book of Numbers, it's got a weird name. I mean, why do they call it Numbers? Well, it starts out by numbering the number of people of Israel, the warriors who are going to go into the land and take the land of Canaan. All right? And but then they find out there are Nephilim in there and they don't go in, right? And so God says this generation is going to die out. And so the book of Numbers is all about that, about them wandering in the wilderness. And then they number them again at the end because that generation has died out and they're ready to go in the land. Okay? And in that process, of course, Moses, I always mix him up with Noah, and so I just want to make sure I got that right. Moses isn't going to be able to go in the land because he messed up and he acted rashly. And so he's going to die before they cross into the land and cross the Jordan River. Okay? So he has a series of sermons that he presents on the plains of Moab, which is right a flat area right across the river from Jordan. Jericho, from Jericho, the city of Jericho they're going to take. And he's given them a series of sermons because these are sermons very similar to Exodus where they got from the Mount Sinai. But that generation that heard those sermons and heard from God himself have died out. So now he's giving these lessons on the plains of Moab so that they make kind of the constitution of the people of Israel when you go and take the land of Israel. And so he's given them, that whole book of Deuteronomy is about that. So this is their constitution. And in Deuteronomy, we read this. The Most High, you see how he's called there? The Most High gave the nations their inheritance when he divided mankind. When was that? Tower of Babel. All right, you know that now. And he fixed the borders of the people according to the numbers of the sons of God. Whoa, B'nai Elohim. That's B'nai Elohim. So he divided them into people groups according to the numbers of the sons of God, but the Lord's portion will be his people, Jacob, his allotted heritage. Okay, so he's going to pull out a group that's going to be of the tribe of Jacob, and that's going to be who he's going to take, but he fixed the number of people groups by the number of the sons of God, and he gave them an inheritance. What's that inheritance? He gave them one of the sons of God, one of the angels that they were building the tower up to worship. You want them? We'll give you one. And so all the people groups, all the family groups that spoke one language dispersed from the plains of Shinar, off into various directions, some up into Europe, some into Africa, some into Asia. And they carried with them their own God, their own small g demon god. And thus they each have their own religion. See that? But God then keeps one portion for himself. And this would be under the line of Abraham and eventually Jacob as his allotted heritage. And so he has the line of Abraham, which he will then work with and bring the son of the woman through that line. And that family line will be attacked and attacked and attacked and attacked in various ways, trying to stop the son of the woman all the way up until the children of Bethlehem are killed. And then the son of the woman makes his appearance. Now, I want to say this, that if you look in your other Bibles, and here's a King James Version, it will have the phrase children of Israel rather than son of the woman, because the text, the Hebrew text that they use, that we've used for years, has a mistake in it. I won't call it a mistake. I think it was intentional. See, the Jews, the oldest text we had was the Masoretic text, and the oldest one is 800 A.D., 800 years after the time of Christ. And I think they did this intentionally. I don't know, though. I don't know how it happened, but we caught them. We caught them recently. And actually, people have known for quite a while there's something wrong here because it was according to the number of the children of Israel, but Israel won't be born until hundreds and hundreds of years after the Tower of Babel. So it doesn't make sense. But it also makes sense if they were searching up for the demons, then this is where they got assigned. Okay, you guys want them, you get them. But I'm keeping one group of people that's going to be where the son of the woman's going to come, and that line's going to be pure. And they aren't to marry other groups of people who might do some damage to that bloodline. All right? And how do we know? Well, see, the Septuagint is 1,000 years older. And it's a Greek translation. It would be like our King James Version to those people then. It was a translation into the common language of the Jewish people who no longer spoke Hebrew. They spoke Greek. And so they translated 200 BC, the Hebrew text, into English. And we have that as a comparison. And it's 99.999% the same. But on this verse, it's different because there it is. You see what I mean? Yeah, see? There's the Greek translation, yeah. But it really says this, that he separated the sons of Adam, and he set the bounds of the nations according to the number of angels of God. And these would be the demonic ones. These are the fallen ones. You want the demons? We're going to give you one. We're going to give you one. We're going to give you one. And I'm going to keep one group for myself, and that's where the Messiah is going to come. And so now, we also have, in the last generation, we have the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it says the same thing, according to the numbers of B'nai Elohim, sons of God. So that is the correct. We caught an error that was trying to be pushed in, and Satan's always trying to do that. And so there's a whole science of comparing manuscripts to make sure there aren't errors, and it's really good. But there are a couple that are still out there. 99.9% of the words are actually authenticated by multiple manuscripts. So we're good. But every once in a while we pick up something like this. And it's good to know people are working on that. So we want to get back to the original meaning, the original text that was inspired by Moses. All right. Now, let's pull it together. Why did God divide the world into nations? Well, because they didn't disperse. Is that the whole answer? They were trying to bring back the Nephilim. And how do they do that? Build a tower to the heavens to make a name for themselves. To bring back men of the name. That is a clear indication they were trying to bring back the Nephilim. And God said he's not going to flood the earth again, so what he's got to do? Nip it. Nip it in the bud. And so he does, and he disperses them. That's why he says nothing that they propose to do will be stopped now. You see what that's saying? They can go as far as they want now, and we're going to stop that and divide them into nations. So we can stop the bringing back of the Nephilim, the giants. What is the problem with a one-world government? What is the problem? Evil always tries to take power. In the United States, even in the United States, which starts out well, isn't doing so well anymore. All right? And if you'll have one nation, one world government, where all the world power is, guess how that's going to turn out? And it's going to push us under one religion. It's going to be a satanic religion. Darkness is going after it. That's why, as we see a one world government coming today, and everybody's saying, oh, we'll stop wars. Oh, no, they'll just get worse. Way worse. Read the book, and you'll see. The end of the book tells us. And so the whole thing is darkness wants to take over the world. How did the Tower of Judgment result in other people groups that are so different from each other? Now, you think about it. That's an important question to ask. It's genetics, though. Simple genetics. All right, you just take one family group, and you see their children, and you go, oh, yeah, that one, I have one son, boy, he's got his mother's eyes. And another son, he's got my build. Poor guy. and he has the same problem. His chest is really big, and then it just starts to slide down. It's starting to happen. But we look like each other because we have the genetic combination from our parents. And then if that stayed together for generations and generations, some people have lighter skin, some darker, that becomes prominent. The darker skinned people can do well in the equatorial regions. Us lighty whiteys, we move north because we just fry. Okay, and so we just naturally don't want to live down there. And darker skinned people can handle that. That's all. And by the way, they're just darker skinned people and lighter skinned people, not racists. They're just people groups. People groups. And that's the biblical view. Get that right. And so we're all the same. Remember, did I tell you this, that what you should fill out in your forms? Yeah, human. Whenever the federal government wants you to say race and they want you to say white, right? Fight that. No, I am human. That's our race. One human race. And that's the origin of the religions. All the different religions show demonic possession. And so there's darkness there. Somebody asked me then, wow, in the last hour, said, well, now wait a minute. What about my family group? I'm going to tell you about my family group, the Polish. You didn't know that. Horton is an English name. My mom married well. No. But the Polish and English, we're all sons of Japheth. And we had our demon. And then some people came and shared the gospel, which is for all people. And at the cross of Christ, it became for all people. But before it was too. In the Hebrew, in the Old Testament, God instructed them to have an area called I just lost the word, something of Gentiles, the court. There we go. The court of the Gentiles. Gentiles is, by the way, the most prominent group that would interface with the Jews, and they're the sons of Japheth from the flood, and the Japhethites. And most of us in this room are Japhethites, but some of us are Hamitic, and some of us are Semitic. All right? And that Semitics would be the Middle Eastern tribes generally. Hamitic will be African, as well as the Far Eastern groups. And the Japhethites are European. And so the name Gentiles was mostly Japhethites, because that's what they thought of as the other people groups. And that became a slang. Well, they were to have a court for the Gentiles. For anybody who wants to come from the other world religions and nations and see who the true God is, you could find them there. Did you know when Jesus got really mad at what they did with the court of Gentiles? Do you see why? They made it a place where they had bad commerce and took advantage of people. And so Jesus dumped over those tables. This is supposed to be where we have a witness to the world, and you're just making a den of robbers. You see why he got angry? Because that's the area of witness to the world. And then we took it to the world, and we now have a faith. So that being the case, what is the appropriate response to people groups and their beliefs? Now, I was at Crazy Horse 2 weeks ago, and we had a discussion right there in the museum down below. How do we respond to the Native Americans appropriately as Christians? And right above us is a museum of all the Native American culture. How do we handle that? How do we deal with that? And as we had that discussion, frank discussion, it'd be interesting to have that discussion in this room. And ask, how many of you have some prejudices here? How should we act? Well, look at the Native Americans. They lived off the land amazingly well. They made use of everything, and we often destroy things, okay? So we have some things to learn from them. They did some great things living there and had great traditions. Now, what about their religion? Well, now we know the origin of it, right? They worship the Great Spirit. Is the Great Spirit our God? No, not really. So we want to tell them about the greater Spirit and the salvation that comes to them too. And so that's where you break off. Everything else is honored. But when we get to that point, we want to just help them understand that the greatest Spirit stepped into time and space, took on human flesh, died as the prophecy of the coming Son of the woman would, but he rose again, so it wasn't permanent, to destroy the works of Satan, and bring you freedom. That's how we respond to the people groups. Honor their traditions and their things, but that we break at the religious point when we get to Christ. And that's a biblical theology of people groups and religion. I hope that'll be helpful in your days. Let's close in prayer. Oh, wait a minute. Never mind. I got ahead of myself. I didn't see Pastor there, and I thought I was on my own. So I see you there. Give Dr. Horton a good hand.
Let me just close and leave you with this. Having truth makes all the difference in the world. When you are lied to, it creates confusion in that particular area. And we've all had people lie to us about something, confused us. There's nothing more important in life than to know the truth about the fact that Jesus loves you, died for you, wants you to go to heaven. And so I hope that you'll love that truth. Next week, I begin a 3-part series in Elijah on depression, and I hope that you'll be a part of that. Let's stand and be dismissed in song.
Hello, I'm Pastor Bruce Spear from Cross Point Church. I want to thank you for tuning in and watching one of our messages. We do hope that the teaching of the Word of God will impact your life and cause you to want to walk closer to the Lord Jesus. I hope that you will also consider supporting the Cross Point ministry so that we can do more for the cause of Christ. If you have questions about your spiritual walk, especially about how to invite Jesus into your life, I hope that you'll call us. God bless you, and again, thanks for watching.